We are going to work on 8.8 this week. So just one section, because this week is actually only a 4-day week. When we had our regular schedule, we were not supposed to have school on Friday. So you guys get the day off of virtual school, and I also get the day off virtual work. So there's just Monday through Thursday this week. We're just going to do one section over the quadratic formula. So here are the 8.8 notes. I have posted them on Google Classroom. I have posted them right here. So one copy is blank, one copy is filled out. I'm doing it all under one section this time. I felt like last week it was a little bit possibly overwhelming for you guys because there was so much in the Google Classroom. There were a lot of different documents. I realized it's a little easier if I just post all of the attachments under one place. So our objective this week is I can solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Okay, so some of this should sound familiar. Some of it is a little bit new. Quadratic equations we should be familiar with. Remember that quadratic equations form a U-shaped curve, so they make what we call a parabola. So what we have like a smiley face, an upside down smiley face, what they use to make the McDonald's arches, and also in roller coasters, lots of places. Quadratic equations are always going to have x squared, so they're going to have x with a little 2. Okay. Our objective also says I can solve. So solve just means that we're going to find x, and in this case, x of the parabola is the solutions, and that is also the x-intercepts. Okay. So to do that for this unit, we are going to use the quadratic the quadratic formula, which is right here. You don't have to memorize it. You get to use your notes. You get to look at mine. It does look pretty long, but I'll show you there's just 3 easy steps and we just plug numbers in for the letters. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Definitely long, but don't worry about it. Like I said, there's only 3 steps, and then once we follow those steps, it's not too bad. We also get to use Desmos. And for this week, I only assigned 4 practice problems for you because I knew that there are so many little steps to the quadratic formula. So the steps are set the quadratic equation equal to 0. So first we need to make sure that there's nothing after the equal sign. And if there is, like there's going to be in the second example that I show you, we just have to do the opposite and move it to the other side. Okay. The second step is we label the A, B, and C terms, which we've actually done before. That's not too tricky. And then we're going to solve using the quadratic formula. So we're going to take this here. We're going to plug in our A, B, and C in parentheses. And then you actually get to use Desmos to do all the algebra for you. Okay. So if we have this equation right here, x squared plus 3x minus 4, the first step says set it equal to 0. So we set it equal to 0. Then we have to label the A, B, and C terms. So our A term is 1 because that's just the first part. It's x squared. There's nothing in front of the x squared, so we put a 1 there. The B term is positive 3, so we put b equals 3. And then the C term is negative 4, so make sure you don't miss the negative signs when they're there. So we did step 2, we have our A, B, and C terms. Our third step is the one that takes the longest. We're going to solve using the quadratic formula. So we take this quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to take that and we're now going to plug in our a, b, and c into the formula. Okay, so we have x equals negative b. So again, I'm just using this right here. I would recommend writing this down, especially when you're doing your practice problems, having it at the top of your page so you can easily reference it. And you might find that you even memorize it or kind of get the hang of it towards the end where you don't have to look back all the time at it. So it goes negative b. So we have a negative sign here. We know that our b term is 3, so we're going to put the 3 there. If you remember from a previous unit, whenever we replace a letter with a number, we have to put it in parentheses. So we're going to put the 3 in parentheses. Then we have the plus or minus sign. Then we do the square root, which I call the check mark button. So we do the check mark. We have the square root of b. So again, b was 3. So we put 3 in parentheses. The squared actually goes outside of the parentheses. So we put 3 in parentheses and then the little 2, exponent of 2. And then the last part at the top is minus 4ac. So because the minus 4 is part of the quadratic formula, we know it's always going to be negative 4 here, and then we're going to plug in 2 numbers at the end in parentheses. So we have negative 4. Our a term is 1, so we put 1 in parentheses. And our c term, again, is actually negative 4, so we're going to put negative 4 in parentheses. So we have that, and then it's all over 2a. So we put a 2 here. It's always going to be 2 at the bottom, and then something in the parentheses. In this case, it's 1 in the parentheses because our a value is 1, right? Now we need to plug it into Desmos, and notice it says plug into Desmos carefully. Okay, so you have to really be careful with the parentheses. I'm also going to show you a couple of other little details we need to do for Desmos. So if we go to Desmos, and this is a little hard to do one-handed, so we're going to start with negative 3 in parentheses. So we do negative 3. The 3 is in parentheses, oops. And it is, we have plus or minus. However, we're not able to do that on Desmos. So I just start with a plus sign first. So it'll just be negative 3 plus. Then we do the square root. So the check mark button down here. And then it was 3 squared. So again, we're going to put 3 in parentheses. And then to get the squared, we put the exponent of 2. We do the a2. And then it's minus 4, not in parentheses. Parentheses 1. And parentheses negative 4. Okay, so we have the top part, but we need to do a couple things before we can enter it and get an answer. So we have the top part. So first we need to put a parentheses around everything that is in the square root. So they know that whole part is getting the square root. So I'm going to put a parentheses there and a parentheses at the end, right? And then we're also going to know we're going to divide the whole thing. So this whole thing we want on the top. We need to divide the whole thing by 2 parentheses 1. So I'm going to put a parentheses here and then 1 at the very end. And then you're going to do divided by. So you can either do the slash on your computer, or you can do the divided by sign on Desmos. So now that turned that whole thing into a fraction, and we're going to do 2 parentheses 1. So it gives us x equals 1. Okay, so we know that's going to be one of our answers. So I already wrote, I wrote that right here, x equals 1. Now remember that it's plus or minus, and we weren't able to do that button. We just did plus. So I'm going to have to go back in and do minus. So then I just go back to my original equation. I don't want to rewrite it. That'll take too much time. I just replace this plus sign with a minus, and I get negative 4. Okay, so negative 4 is our other solution. So if we go to my answer, when I did this by myself, I also got negative 4 and 1. So that would be your final answer. X equals negative 4 and x equals 1. Again, to get that answer though, we would need to show all of the work. So what I'm looking for on your own is that you show me that you set it equals to 0, that you labeled the A, B, and C, and that you plugged in your work into the quadratic formula. So this part right here is probably the most important part. If you get stuck there and you're having issues plugging it into Desmos, I can try to walk you through it, but that's kind of the most important part. Now, a way we can always double check our work is we can take the original equation, x squared plus 3x minus 4, and we can plug that into Desmos. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, delete that. I plug that into Desmos, I get a parabola, right? It looks like this. The solutions are the x-intercepts, so where it hits the x-axis. So that is 1 and negative 4. So we know that we did it correctly, okay? Takes a lot of practice. We'll go ahead and do this example here together, and then I do have just 4 that I'm asking you to do on your own. All right, so let's take a look at this one because this one is a little bit different. We have x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 2. So let's start with step 1. It says set the quadratic equation equal to 0. So right now, this one looks a little bit different because it has equals 2, where this one over here didn't have anything, so it was already equal to 0. So to make it equal to 0, we have to move away the positive 2. So to do that, we have to do negative 2 because we're doing the opposite. So we do negative 2 to both sides. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Pretend there's a line drawn right here from the equal sign. So that would cancel out and give us 0 on this side. We would do negative 1 minus 2. You owe your friend $1 and you borrow 2 more. You're going to end up owing them $3. So it would be x squared plus 2x minus 3. The second step tells us to label our a, b, and c terms. So we would go ahead and do a is equal to 1 because there's nothing in front of the x. Sometimes there will be. You'll have a couple below that are. There is a number that's not 1, but in these 2 examples, they just happen to be 1. Our b term is 2, and then our c term is negative 3. So we have our a, b, and c terms. The last step, which is the longest, says solve using the quadratic formula. So we're going to plug in our a, b, and c into this quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so we have x equals, it's supposed to be negative b, so we put a negative sign. Our b is 2, so we're going to put the 2 in parentheses. Remember, parentheses are really important because whenever you replace a letter with a number, you have to use parentheses. Then we have plus or minus. Then we have the square root, so the check mark. B squared, so b is 2, so we're going to put 2 in parentheses, a little exponent of 2 here, minus 4ac. So we have minus 4. Remember, that's always going to be minus 4. Our a term is 1. So we put 1 in parentheses. Our c term is negative 3. We put negative 3 in parentheses. All over 2a. So we're going to have a 2 here. And our a term is 1. So we put 1 in parentheses. Okay. Now our last part is to plug it into Desmos. So we have negative 2 in parentheses, and then it says plus or minus. Remember, we can't do that button, so we're going to just start with plus. The square root, so we do the check mark. 2 squared, so we put 2 in parentheses. The squared is the exponent of 2, so we do a2, and that's going to be outside of the parentheses. Minus 4, it's always going to be that. And in this case, it was, I believe, parentheses 1, parentheses negative 3. Yep, parentheses 1. Oops. It's a little hard to do with one hand. Parentheses 1, parentheses negative 3. But remember, this is going to be the top part, and we want it all over 2a. So first thing is we want to make sure that this part is that's in the square root, so that's in the check mark. We want that part in parentheses, so we're going to do a big parentheses on the right at the beginning and a big parentheses at the end. We also want the negative sign and the 2 to be part of the top. So we're going to put a parentheses at the beginning and a closed parentheses at the very end. And then you're going to do divided by. So I just did the slash sign on my laptop right here. But you can also do just the divide sign on Desmos. And then it's 2 parentheses 1. Oops. So we got x equals 1. Let's check. Yep, I got x equals 1. But you are going to have 2 answers because remember it's the plus or minus. So we had plus here, but we're also going to change that to a negative. So if I did negative, I'm going to get -3. So my answers will be x is equal to -3 and x is equal to 1. A great way we can double check our work is we can plug in our original equation, which we had was, and when I say original, I mean the one that we started with our a, b, and c terms. So this one here, x squared plus 2x minus 3. So go ahead and fix that. X squared plus 2x minus 3. So we have a parabola, it opens up. We want them to, the x-intercepts to be -3 and 1. So I have -3 and I have 1. So that's a great way you can check it on your own to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Again, I know this is a lot. I know there's a lot of little steps for the quadratic formula. Really write it out. You're welcome to do the work on paper, take a picture of it and send it to me via email or on Google Classroom. I am asking that you just do these 4 problems right here. And I even got started a little bit for you. So the first thing I did for 1, you don't have to rearrange anything. It's already equal to 0. So I went ahead and labeled the A term, the B term, and the C term for you, okay? For 2, it's already equal to 0. You're gonna go ahead and have to find the A term, the B term, and the C term. 3, notice that it's not equal to 0, so I showed you what you would do. So you'll have to just kind of move over the +4. I'm actually gonna move this, you'll be adding that to the end. So it won't be 8x, it won't be 0x, sorry. It'll be next to the 4x. So it'll be x squared minus 4x plus 4. Okay, and then for this one, you already have the 3 on the side. So you just have to, it's already equal to 0. So you just have to label the A term, the B term, and the C term. Okay, definitely do your best with this. You're welcome to email me throughout the week if you have questions. You can always send me the work that you have and I can try to lead you in the right direction. If you finish this early before Thursday, I can give you a little more practice work. Otherwise, I ask that these 4 are due by Thursday, and I'll enter them in. Each week you will get points in the gradebook on Infinite Campus. I just have 1 assignment per week that goes in there. Okay, so for this week, it's just these 4. All right, good luck, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.